Guys, welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast. We have Elad Gilo today with us. He is co-founder, CEO at Reach. He built the tool MagicReach.ai, which I'm a user of. He's based in Milan, Italy. We're going to talk about sales. We're going to talk about cold emails, cold outreach on LinkedIn, and everything in between. Elad, welcome to the pod. Tell us a bit more about yourself and tell us a bit more about Reach.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Yeah, so I founded Reach about a little over a year ago with my co-founder Guillermo, after having worked together in a company in Amsterdam, venture-backed company, which we were on the sales team. So we both have a long background in sales. And as anyone knows, who's kind of been doing outbound sales for many years, a lot of the process is very tedious, very repetitive. And you also know that recently what tends to work with outreach is not only good copy, all of the best practices, deliverability, but also making sure that you have well-researched emails that are personalized and relevant. And that will really get you replies, right? So we wanted a way to kind of operationalize that. And that's ultimately what brought us to build Reach, which is an AI personalization assistant that helps you research your prospects faster and personalize your emails faster.
Right. So my ideal Chrome extension on LinkedIn would be like one click and then it would connect and send something personalized. In my case, it would be for the podcast. For example, nowadays I just copy paste like half of the LinkedIn profile page. I tell GPT to come up with some podcast questions and it answers with almost perfect podcast questions. And yeah, I get really high response rate and booking rate. How far is Reach from that vision?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think still that AI will require human oversight for a little bit still. I think that sellers need to review what they're doing, and I think that's okay. Like, I actually don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think what's more important for us is to make sure that we have the right information. And we also see that you probably use ChatGPT a lot, and anything that you see. Sometimes they can get a little too creative, right? It can start to, like, if there is, especially if there's a lack of information, which some profiles have a lack of information, it will start to try to insert its own things that aren't really there, or maybe exaggerate something. So from that point of view, we still think that having human oversight for the next little while is probably a feature, not a bug. But yes, it will get closer to that. But more importantly, what we want to make sure that it does, and what Reach is kind of doing and moving towards, is figuring out how can we make sure that what you're going to send is the most relevant thing to send, right? And I think relevance beats everything. Sending the right message to the right person at the right time is kind of the holy grail. And so Reach is all about trying to make sure we get the right information, so of that information we can understand, okay, this is the most relevant information to use, and really tie it into your value prop, right? And then so that's really where the direction Reach is going. So it'll be much more, it'll flow better, and it'll be very hyper relevant to who you're sending it to.
Right. And then comes once we fix the AI problem, well, first question is it better? Is it just about better prompting to send a more relevant LinkedIn outreach message? I mean, in my case, for the podcast, sending the questions or the topic about the podcast, probably the holy grail. For my agency, let's say that mentioning examples of 3 campaigns that I could do for you as a cold email agency is probably also the holy grail. But my question is, you mentioned that there would need to be some oversight. Can we remove oversights by better prompting, or this is straight up waiting for ChatGPT 5, let's say?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think prompting plays a certain role. I really think that the data you have available plays a really big role. And but to be fair, I think ChatGPT will do a pretty good job. And we've seen plenty of examples of this, and we do a lot of experiments ourselves. But for example, if you were to say, "Hey, this is my value prop," right? And now find something in this person's profile that connects or like make this connect, right? And like ChatGPT will do a pretty decent job of that. Um, and so yes, I think that we're very close to ChatGPT or OpenAI in general being able to identify on your behalf what is the most relevant thing to identify, right? If someone has a huge profile, and maybe it's not just, LinkedIn is just one piece of this, right? But it could be we're also identifying a LinkedIn, or sorry, a news article that came out, a 10K report, job listings, something like that. So we're getting all these different data. That's a big piece of what we're doing is like, how do we aggregate a ton of different information, not just their LinkedIn profile? And then of that, what is the most relevant, high impact thing to use? And I think ChatGPT will do a very decent job. That being said, I do think, at least from our experience so far, a lot of people love to have that control. Like they still want to say, okay, no, I have certain preferences. I like this more. There's still things we can do to identify reading between the lines, nuance that we're pretty good at, identifying as people. But I don't think we're far off, to be honest. I think that it's probably in the next few like couple of years that this can maybe be hands off. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I've seen the AI stuff because I work in this way just like get a little too creative sometimes. And for that reason, I'm a little hesitant to say like yes, like in a few months it'll be all hands off and you just let it go.
Right, because most of my mentality is speed and quantity. I don't like waiting for stuff, even if that comes at the price of my reputation. Well, first on LinkedIn, I'd be a bit more careful, right? Because there's my face, and if I fuck up, people will kind of remember me and who I am. Cold email, I think it's another story. Cold email, I'm like,
Yeah.
I have more freedom, and I can tolerate the mess ups, the hallucinations of ChatGPT. My question is the model when it comes to cold outreach. I run this product market fit lab. So we test out product variants with a bunch of markets. Is the AI role kind of the middleman and test out like in between what product fits with what niche? And could that be a magic click on my LinkedIn? I just click, the AI knows what I do by scraping my profile. It scrapes the prospect profile and determines which of the product variants would be the best for their actual industry and what they do. Would that be like a magical model?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer. I'll say that. I think that the although I think that the way to approach all of these things, I honestly think that the direction that a lot of ChatGPT is going in is going to start working with kind of smaller data sets, ironically, right? So like ChatGPT is actually this, right? It has this massive amount of data points and information behind it. But where I think it's really going to start being leveraged is like, how do you start to hook it up to these very, very specific data sets? So, and that's when you can start to run your specific experiments, for example, right? So it'd be, hey, we have some product variants that are appropriate for different ICPs. We can kind of segment those, run some tests, and then really start to prove out, right, if they actually are the correct ones or not. And then I think from that point of view, ChatGPT, once you have that kind of foundation, will run beautifully. Um, so I see us living in a world where we're going to have a lot of these various AI tools that we can set up these very quick experiments based on these very kind of niche data sets, come to some conclusion. And then based on that, we can just, off to the races with kind of ChatGPT to make those connections for us. So the data will be key here. I don't know if I would like, I don't know, again, I don't want to pretend to be some sort of more expert than I am, but I think there would be some training or some kind of data sets in the beginning to kind of make those initial connections.
I can foresee a future in which some platforms evaluate us in a quadrant, a la Gartner, if you want, and from all of our testimonials or reviews, they place us in some place, and then we just click a button, and the agent, it goes out and see where's the best fit for you, according to the competition, according to if the company has buying intent, and so forth, according to if you have the intention to carve your micro niche into ads for meta ads for insurtech, for example. I can somewhat see that future, in which really you have all these agents doing that automatic work for you, because the market is such a complicated place, and buyers, for example. So buyers would put like all their criteria in one place. you would put your criterias, and then you'd let the agent run, and eventually that would lead to a future with almost no sales. Let's say in 100 years from now, it would be like purely product. What do you think about that somewhat dystopian vision?
Yes, it's interesting you mentioned this. This is like, to some degree, something the direction that Reach is trying to go into, right? So we're big believers that sort of really effective outreach is trigger based. And so kind of you mentioned like intent data, stuff like that. Or, you know, the way a lot of intent companies so far have been working are much more around like user intent, how they engage with your website, things like that, right? And trying to like target the right people. What we often do as salespeople, and I'm sure you do this yourself, is like we look for indications that a prospect is in a buying mode in that time, and this would be a relevant topic to them. When you reach out to that person with the relevant message and you've identified that timing, the response rates are unbelievable, right? Because you've cracked this thing that for most sales is not like that, right? Most sales is get a lead list, try to do a little bit of research around those personas to try to, you know, make it more interesting and more personal message, but start from the lead list rather than start from the intent or the trigger. And so one thing we're really doing, we're trying to do with Reach, and we'll be launching quite soon, is basically a trigger tool that will allow you to identify very quickly which prospects are most relevant to reach out to now because of X, Y, and Z signals, and we're going to be scanning for these signals. So I agree with you that that this feature I do think is kind of on the way, and that as long as you have access to the data, right, and as long as you're kind of in a position to monitor that data, and again, the limitation at the moment, right, is that, you know, ChatGPT isn't running on real-time information. It's not even real time. It's actually kind of dated, but it's certainly not day-to-day real time. And so looking for signals is a lot. You have to be a lot more fast. You have to be a lot faster than that. But I do think we'll get there, and I think that potentially leads us to a situation where like you can really like sales will just be trigger based. I really think that's where it's going to get.
Right. And regarding that last piece of data you gave us, have you tried using Hugging Face, for example, or Bard instead of GPT? Yes, it's disconnected from the internet, but it's so much better in so many ways. So have you thought of using other generative AIs out there, or is GPT the best?
That's interesting. I'm curious to hear your feedback on like why you think it's better. We experimented. This was like, I want to say not super recent. I want to say maybe like 8 months ago. We did some experiments with Hugging Face. Didn't find them as good as GPT-3 at the time. But we're constantly kind of going back whether looking for what's around. I think, just like I think many people, I don't think I'm alone in this. I think, you know, a lot of these you know, LLM models are going to be quite commoditized. There's going to be a bunch of different players. You know, the tech is going to start to be quite commoditized, and so I can imagine in a world we're living with quite a few different you know, qualitatively equal you know, options out there. For now, we've been pretty happy with the results with actually, let's say very happy with the results with OpenAI. But I'm curious, what did you see that from Hugging Face or from Bard that kind of makes them seem better in some areas?
I started testing them, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, and got somewhat better answer, or was better surprised with Hugging Face in some instant. OpenAI and ChatGPT wins 80% of the time, but
Right.
yeah, Hugging Face kind of surprised me. Google, I found it confused sometimes, and yeah, probably one of the worst in my list, at least, was Bing Chat. It was really bad. It doesn't give great results. You know, it redirects you to other link, which is what a search engine was basically doing. And then it also stops the conversation. Sometimes you feel that it's kind of GPT, but like with an attitude. That's how I call it. But yeah, like let's see the future. It would be cool to see an LLM aggregator as well. Although that is somewhat complex to do and to reverse engineer the results, but that could be an interesting platform that combines like all answers and gives you the best. The next question I had
Interesting.
is, what intro have you seen the best working? Is it talking about their last LinkedIn post? Is it talking about their last podcast? Is it talking about news? What have you seen
Hmm.
typically that is the best intro on LinkedIn that is?
Yeah, good question. I think kind of relating to what I was mentioning before about triggers, I think what we've seen also just when we do our own outreach, the stuff that is indicates right that something is very relevant now. So which could be like LinkedIn activity if it's relevant and it's kind of a recent activity, like does super well. I know a lot of people kind of following us and doing this, and so this tactic might not work for very long if too many people start doing the same thing, but it's been working phenomenally. I'd say news does well. It depends what you're selling, of course, right? Like if you're selling like HR tools or something like that, I think, and you see open jobs, and you're able to really talk about kind of, how the company is growing or planning on growing. These types of things do very, very well. And just because it shows a ton of research, and it's just very relevant to something they're dealing with now. And so when you combine that kind of relevant timing, and content relevant, and yeah, it tends to do extremely well. But honestly, it really depends on who you're reaching out to, what you're selling. We have like customers across the board who love different presents. Some love to use kind of website information. Some like to use, information around the company itself. Um, I like company overview. I know some people don't, but I like kind of reaching out to people, showing that like I know exactly what they do, like I know what their company does, because like I can't tell you how many emails I receive from people who like it's so obvious they have no idea what we do. And if they would just put in like one or two sentences, like actually telling me that they looked us up and what we did, like I would be way more inclined to read the rest of their email.
Right. One of the best offers I've observed lately, and you can have a funnel at the back end of this, is offering people to come on a podcast just to discuss and exchange ideas. And I find that it's win-win. You get exposure. My audience, they get insights. So I win also. It's like win-win-win. Have you seen other front end offers like that are better than, hey, let's just hop on a demo call, that people have used and seen high conversion rates?
Hmm. Like in general or for ourselves? Like have we seen others try?
Both.
So we actually we tried something ourselves. We had a kind of like I guess we just haven't done it as frequently, but kind of a podcast called Email Hot Takes, and we try to bring in people in the sales community to kind of talk about cold email, cold outreach. Um, and that's been really cool. And it definitely, I think one of these just like when you do it kind of genuinely, which I think you're doing as well, like it just creates a lot of goodwill, and like people are much more open. So I do like those tactics. Trying to think of anything else. I mean, I think honestly, I think this is just LinkedIn, like what this kind of classic social selling, right? Like I think LinkedIn is a really powerful platform for this. And of course, it really depends who your ICP is. I happen to work with other salespeople, so LinkedIn is kind of like the best place to be. If you're selling to an industrial space, that might not be the case. But for us, when you actually engage with people in a genuine way and you're commenting and you're interacting and you're exchanging ideas and it feels very natural, like a lot of stuff can come out of that, right? And so that's where I think kind of the power of these kind of platforms, where it's not just like hitting them up, hey, let's jump on a call, I'm going to pitch you this. It's just like exchanging ideas, and there's a lot of goodwill.
Right. It's hard to think of something new. Like some that come to my mind is guest posting slash guest blogging. So you can come on my blog and you're in charge of the content, and I just give you the views, for example. That would be
Hmm.
one. Another that I've had success lately is service exchange. So let's say that I need a finance coach, and that finance coach needs a sales expert or a cold email consultant like myself. Well, we just exchange services. We both get value out of this, and who knows, maybe he gets more value after. Sometimes I decide to buy his service, and maybe he decides to actually go with my service and pay me something. So these have been front end, and I've been quite obsessed in finding better front end offers than the podcast, because it's working so well. It's like the views, it's the knowledge, and it's potential collaboration. So yeah, lots of potential for that one, and that's been monopolizing lots of my time nowadays.
It's interesting you mentioned that. We just, for the first time, we're doing an exchange, like you mentioned. So we have this guy who was a small SEO company, but they're fantastic, and he needs help getting new clients. But we need help SEO because that's not our game. So we decided to do an exchange, and I'm all for it. I love when you can kind of find like-minded entrepreneurs and just like exchange value.
Right. I was even thinking of starting a platform of service exchange, but then the business model is not so clear. Like pay $30 per week to be on the platform, and then the same stuff happens with Upwork that everyone goes outside the platform or something. But yeah,
Right.
that's definitely like not super exploited. Well, I can see that people will not go out of the platform because they would want to exchange with more than one thing, right? What are you interested in? SEO, paid ads. You could check a bunch of boxes and have specific profiles.
Totally.
Just that, yeah, it's yeah, the degree of reward is kind of limited towards uh, the financial cost, the energy, and all of that it will take to build. But certainly an interesting model and have a lot of success. Last question for you, Elad. Where do you want to take Reach in terms of financial goals this year? How much lines you want to generate, and where do you want to take the startup?
Hmm. I think this year for us is basically crossing into the kind of 7-figure ARR range. If we can do that, would be delighted. So that's kind of the North Star for us by the end of 2023. In terms of lines, I don't know. I think many tens and tens and tens of thousands of prospects, hopefully, that we can help research and personalize for people. But yeah, I think we're really excited about this specific year because very soon we get to launch Reach Triggers, and this is going to take us in a very interesting direction of like helping you reach out to the right person at the right time with the right message. And I think that's when prospecting kind of becomes amazing. So this is our goal, to get that working really as like a polished product by the end of the year, hit those numbers, and yeah, we'll be delighted.
Love it, man. Yeah, pretty ambitious. Love the boldness here. So where can people find out more about you and Magic Reach?
Yes, I mean we're very active on LinkedIn actually. So my co-founder Guillermo Blanco and myself, like you can find us LinkedIn. We're publishing a lot, posting and engaging on our website at MagicReach.ai. And sometimes we're asked to join on different podcasts, but for the most part, I think LinkedIn is definitely probably the place where you get the most up-to-date information. We do have a mailing list as well, so you're welcome to join that, and we always post kind of latest updates.